is pretty well defined in advance, and so there isn't too much room for getting lost along the way. So we definitely have best practices that we can share from our division for the rest of the college. When you look at some of the other pillars of guided pathways, we have navigators to help support students along the way. We've had some grants to help address some of the issues that Curtis is talking about with data. Some of our grants depend on how well our coding is, and so we've done intake processes for a lot of these programs to make sure that we know exactly what these students are intending to do when they're with us, and so we can either count them for our numbers, or we can help them achieve their goal. And so I think as far as guided pathways and some of the issues that Curtis brings up that we constantly struggle here with North, whether or not a student is here to take one class to get into a program at UW, or they're here to do prerequisites, they're on a pathway. They're here with us on their pathway to whatever their end goal is. And so I think we really need to think about the different pathways we have, the structures that we have in place, and make sure that we serve all the students that come through our doors. So as far as the takeaways from the session that I was at with Curtis, when we look at guided pathways, it seems like this big, huge undertaking. How are we ever going to change our systems? There are some things that we can't change with the state board software, for example, or the state board intake. But what we can do is pull together as a team and use the resources that we do have, which is everybody in this room. That's what the college spends its money on. We spend our money on people. We don't spend our money on things. And so that's what we have. And so when you're looking at these big system changes, one of the methodologies that they suggest doing 90-day cycles, looking at, which works really well for a quarter system because we're essentially on a 90-day cycle, so we can set goals for each quarter, kind of bite-sized pieces, and start working our way towards this. And 5 years down the road, we can look back and say, wow, look at all that we've accomplished. So that was my big takeaway.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jillian Fisher, and I'm one of the academic advisors here. And talking about pathways, I am the pathway advisor for students that are working on arts, humanities, social science, and education programs. I also coordinate our START new student orientation program as well. So I went to the breakout session that was called Student Voice and Guided Pathways. Unfortunately, there weren't any actual students there, but they did show some videos of some students and shared some results from different surveys. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what I learned in that breakout session. So the videos of they were interviewing different students. I don't know where the students were from, it didn't say, but they were specifically talking about advising and guided pathways. And what the students were repeatedly saying, and these were students from different campuses, was that they really appreciated having a specific advisor that they could go to that was kind of their person, that was also specialized in the area of focus that they wanted to study while they were at that school. So if anybody doesn't know, that's what we have been doing. We started that work in our advising office here at North a year ago this fall, of having advisors work with students in specific pathways and doing a caseload model with advising, where we're intentionally reaching out to specific students that are on our caseload and trying to build that intentional relationship with those students and have that more consistent. So we're just starting that work. I know there's a lot more to do, but it felt nice to hear that students in this video were asking for that and valuing that if it was happening at their schools. Also, a lot of the students were talking about appreciating when their advisors and faculty were working closely together and knew what were going on, maybe located in the same area or attending, advisors going into classrooms within their pathway areas and working really strongly with faculty. Additionally, something that came up repeatedly for the students in that video was just talking about having really clear understanding of what they needed to do, as well as what electives would best fit what their pathway was. So when they had some choice, wanting to know what are good ideas and options within what I'm working on. So that was kind of the first half of my workshop, was listening to these video clips of these students. And I think all of this is we can have available, I think, a lot of the stuff from the all of the workshop that we went to. So if anybody wants stuff, you can reach out to us because we have those things accessible. The second part of the workshop was really focusing on some results from a survey that they gave students, mostly regarding career exploration. And in this survey, the majority of students were talking about feeling like they were not giving any information by anybody about career exploration within their pathway. Now again, I don't know who these students were, so I don't know what schools they were coming from or what their programs were set up to be, but a lot of them were saying that they weren't getting any information about, maybe they were in a pathway but they didn't know what careers that was going to lead to down the road. So some of the folks that were in the workshop were talking about the work that was happening at their schools already in this area. A lot of folks were talking about that there's all this information on our website, but the students aren't going to the websites to look at that information. So making some intentional changes about reaching out to students using social media, Twitter, those kinds of things to reach out to students. And also there was a faculty member at one of the colleges was talking about how they've really embraced within her department, she was a computer science instructor, incorporating career exploration into their classes. So having assignments within their classes related to, doing research on careers, writing resumes, having people from the industry come in and do guest speaking. So that was one of the ways that they were addressing that at that particular school. That was kind of the gist of the workshop I was at. I think one thing also that I've been thinking about a lot before we went, and probably even more so now that I'm back, that I don't have an answer for this, is the concept of how do we balance meeting students where they're at while also still trying to require things that we feel like are really important and not wanting to put extra burden on our students. We know our students have a lot of time constraints, but also what are the things that are really valuable that we feel like are important. And everyone on the panel can laugh because there was a little joke about this idea that students don't do optional. So that was kind of a catchphrase from one of the presenters at the conference, and she even brought it up a notch and said humans don't do optional. So not just students, but humans don't do optional. But this idea of if we're trying to incorporate some of these things that we know are going to be very helpful, how do we do that while at the same time remaining flexible and honoring our students and meeting them where they're at? So that's still a big question that I have.
Hi, I'm Kelda. I am faculty in the art department, and I am the faculty chair for the art program, and I'm also co-chair for program review. So I went down to the Pathways training with a couple different viewpoints. One with really the privilege of being the chair of program review and knowing all of, being privy to all of the individual work that's being done by faculty in the instructional programs, because it's outstanding work. So many of our programs already make heroic efforts to guide their students through their programs. That gives them the most efficient way through, the most enriching way through, the most rigorous and supported way through. So I really felt so proud of the work that the faculty are doing, again, on having the instructional lens that I do. And so I was really just there to learn. I don't want to sit up here and pretend I know much more than you. I am only one day ahead, maybe behind some of you that already have been on this train. So I just want to be really forthcoming about that. The breakout session that I went to is called Demystifying Guided Pathways, and I believe you had a chance to pick up the packet. I saw it printed out there, Amy, right? So there might be more if you didn't grab that one. I would suggest it. It has a lot of the questions that I had and still have, just in terms of how this affects our instruction. And then I also really went down with my lens as a very strong advocate for the arts and humanities and social sciences in my position as faculty in that division. And I think I was really heartened to hear that it really was, as Warren, I think justly introduced it to us today, as being for the student's success. So encouraging exploration with an end goal in mind, or with some clarity for the student in mind, and with us as faculty helping them, checking in with them on their educational journey, which we are already doing, which, as DeAndre mentioned and Joe, a lot of us are doing the work. So for me, I'm kind of torn between thinking this is really simple, like we're doing this, and also, okay, but how do we scale up the really great work that's being done in pockets and are sometimes siloed departments and areas of the school. Some takeaways for me was when we make decisions, either as an instructor for an individual class or as a program chair for an entire program, sometimes we make it really based off of the availability of the faculty to teach that, or anecdotally from a couple students asking for a continuation of the class. And I think those are all really valid reasons to explore your program decisions, but to also, every time we make a decision as a program, to ask what are the equity implications of this decision that we are about to make. That always is something that we keep at the front. And I really appreciated that about this Guided Pathways initiative. Not initiative. Transformation. It's all very like Guided Pathways, transformation. It feels very grandiose, but I like to look at it as just really practical ways of reaching our students and making sure they get through. There's a couple other lines that stuck out that I heard during the day. One was, no student at North should ever fail due to a barrier that either A, we created, or B, we overlooked. So there are so many obstacles to learning that students are bringing to us, and we know that and we do our best, but maybe there are obstacles that we're actually creating. And so can we look at that a little bit deeper, inspired by the Guided Pathways framework, but also in part funded by the grant. So if we have some funding now to make some of these structural changes, it seems like something we should and can take advantage of. Another thing that I don't know that I had ever really thought about before was, you know, we say we're so part-time, you know, we're the part-time student population, but is it that way just because that's the way it is, or is it possible that some students are part-time because they don't really trust or know that they could be a full-time student in a short amount of time, like in a 2-year amount of time? So do students not actually know the value of a full-time education at North? Could we take some 10-credit students and turn them, you know, have them take 15 and feel really good and supported about being a 15-credit bearing student here at the time? It's just questions that I think are really interesting to think about, and as an instructor, get me actually more excited. I didn't leave feeling restricted or threatened as an instructor, and as an instructor in the arts. So I would love to talk about the demystifying Guided Pathways together as a group, if there are questions about any of those at the end.
So another who joined us was Edgar Yasso. He is math faculty and math department chair. He couldn't be here today because he's teaching, but he shared with us throughout the day when we were together, and then we talked a lot as we were waiting for the plane as well, about how it was eye-opening to him to think about the types of students, and instead of taking as a given that a lot of our students need to be part-time, or that you know, the assumptions that we make about our students, maybe they're not all true. He also shared with me that he was curious to, and the math department is exploring things like co-requisites and further reducing the time that it takes for a student to get to college level math specifically. He also said to say that you may hear New Orleans jazz music coming out of his office if you walk by, because he is hooked. For me, I'm Peter Lortz, I'm the Vice President of Instruction. I should have said that earlier. I spent the last, as of July, I was the 3.5 years before that at South, working at a Guided Pathways institution and essentially thrust into the deep end of leading Guided Pathways as someone who had no idea what it was. And so it was fascinating to make some mistakes, to learn from a lot of people who are doing a lot of great things around the country. In some parts of the country, to be viewed as an expert on this, which scares me to death. But coming back to North, and Warren and I had a chance to talk about this back in May and June when I was interviewing, coming back to North with 3.5 years of experience in my brain of things that went right, things that I would have done differently, and now getting a chance to hit the reset button myself. So and by the way, working with AACC while I was at South, so crossing paths with some of the very same people that I'd been working with for 3.5 years, and them asking me why am I at Guided Pathways 101, et cetera, explain my new role. I am really fascinated and want to make sure that we get right the organization and structure around Guided Pathways. So the focus for me was what are the colleges doing? The colleges that are getting us right. How are they organizing? How are they structuring themselves around us? Warren and I attended a breakout that focused on just that, and I have to smile, and some of you already have felt the impact of this. Their first message was fewer committees and fewer meetings. So I've been looking at my own calendar, frankly, and Jeanette and I have been talking about why are all of these meetings necessary? The message, and it's in line with what Aaron said about the 90-day rule, the message from our speaker was, you don't need standing committees for all of these things, but identify an outcome, identify a task, bring together the group that needs to be brought together, decide on when and how to get that outcome done, and what the timeline is, and then when that's completed, the group goes away. And so, at least from my end and from instruction, you're going to see that approach with a lot of this. That's not to say that standing committees go away. It's not to say that we're not going to have any meetings, but a refocusing instead of every day a different meeting with a different standing committee where we're in many cases saying the same things that we said the week before or the day before. Instead being more intentional about why we're coming together and what the outcome is. The other thing that I heard and really appreciated was inviting and including non-traditional perspectives into the conversation. The example that they shared was work at a college on the East Coast where they were looking at the admissions process for that college. And the chairs of the group were the head of security and someone from facilities. So they intentionally picked two people who weren't in that work already. The questions that came up, the very simple, why does it have to be that way, questions that came up really forced the group to get outside of their own work and rethink, is this really serving, is this really what's best for the students? So I appreciated hearing that and thinking, you shouldn't always go to the same cast of characters to mull over, discuss, and come to conclusions on the same things that they've been talking about for years and years.
Mic check. All right. Yes. So now we're going to open up the floor for questions for the panel, and we do have on video that Pete said no meeting. So, with that being said, is there any just major questions for the panel as we begin to open the floor? No pressure. All right. Well, we're not, because we want to stay on time anyway. So. Once again, the question and comment answer we have on your table for an index card, for sure, for those who may have a question, but then also you can email anyone on this panel. And we're going to now get ready.
One last thing. Please know, thank you. Please know that we know we, the cabinet, and we, instructional and student development council, know that North is in a major learning part of this journey. And we're not going to take that lightly. And so there will be opportunities to learn, there will be opportunities to share, to ask questions. This is not the, okay, now you all understand what Seattle Pathways are, check, what's on the program map or something like that. We understand that there's a lot of learning to do, and we want to give opportunities for that.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we're going to move on to the second component of our program today, which is giving you some updates and some information about Seattle Promise. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Kurt Buttelman, who is our Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Services, who will give us some update and information on Seattle Promise.
Thank you. Can I take a quick moment and reflect back on the Seattle Pathways? How many faculty in the room here today? Just raise your hand. Great. So I was at a similar meeting, kickoff of Seattle Pathways at Seattle Central 2 weeks ago. The room was full like this, so that's exciting. So Sal has been on this journey for a couple, 3 years now. Central's embarking on it, North as well, is starting to formally embrace this or explore this, I guess, is the way of looking at it. So I was a little disappointed though. You guys went to New Orleans, and I'm coordinating some of this across the district and wasn't invited. Central's going to Chicago, and I'm not invited. But I did get to go to CTAC with South Lunch. So South is winning in my way. So one of the initiatives that's very Pathways related that the college is going on, I'm using the term initiatives intentionally there, is Seattle Promise. So today I want to invite Melody McMillan up to give us a quick update and an opportunity for folks to ask questions about Seattle Promise. You've hopefully read about it in the newspaper. Hopefully you know that Kelsey has been the worker for North on Seattle Promise, and I think we should all give Kelsey a round of applause. So this is a new initiative, one of the mayor's top priorities, to roll this new thing out. Kelsey's been the person here at North who's been responsible for doing that with Ingram High School. So Melody will get into some of the details of the future of this. Just real quickly, the initiative is 7 years. It was when the levy was passed, the Family Educational Preschool Promise levy in November. And after that 7 years, the expectation is that Seattle colleges will continue the program on out of local scholarship and donated funds. So we won't make a pitch today for your contributions to the $175 million endowment, but don't be surprised if someone does in the future. So I'll introduce Melody McMillan, who is familiar to most of you, so she's now still housed here at North. She's on the dark side and the district office employee now, reporting to me, and then Joe and other VPs of student services help support that effort as well. So thank you.
I'm good. Thank you. All right, yeah, so my name is Melody McMillan. I'm the proud former director of advising here at North and served in that role for about 2 years, and then recently transitioned to be the Seattle Promise Director for the district. And so I'm working closely with many of you to help launch Seattle Promise, and then also with your counterparts at Central and at South. And today the goal is to give you an overview of what Seattle Promise is and to talk a little bit about our expansion plan. So as Dr. Buttleman mentioned, with the passing of the levy, that means that Seattle Promise will be expanding from what it is currently. So talk a little bit about that plan, and then I want to stop talking and hear any questions that you may have, or rumors or myths that maybe you've heard about the program that we can clarify today. So Seattle Promise is a program that grew out of South Seattle College's 13th year program, their 13th year scholarship program. It's designed to provide financial and academic support for students who graduate from Seattle Public High School regardless of their income, regardless of GPA, regardless of their background. So undocumented students are eligible. This program is open to any student who graduates from Seattle Public High School with a high school diploma. So who qualifies for Seattle Promise? For students who graduated in 2018 or students who are graduating this year, this spring in 2019, students who are coming from 6 partner high schools are eligible for Seattle Promise. So it's a smaller group of high school graduates that are eligible last year and then this year. And then certain high schools are paired with certain colleges. So you may already know Ingram High School grads are partnered with North Seattle College. So if a student graduates from Ingram High School with a high school diploma this spring, then they would be eligible to enroll as a Seattle Promise student at North this fall quarter. And then the other high schools that we're partnering with district-wide are Garfield, those students can go to Central, and then Chief South, Cleveland, Rainier Beach, and West Seattle, those high schools are partnered with South Seattle College. Starting for the graduates of 2020, so next year, all of those students at any of the 17 public high schools will be able to enroll as a Seattle Promise student at the Seattle College of their choice. So starting with the class of 2020, any student from any of the 17 high schools will be able to choose any of our 3 colleges to be a Seattle Promise Scholar. What are the program requirements? So we also buy into students don't do optional, and so we have very structured onboarding pathway for these students to set them up for success once they get into the program. One of the main changes from South Seattle's 13th year program to the Seattle Promise program is the equal emphasis on access and completion. So the 13th year program was really heavily focused on access to higher ed and removing that financial barrier. Seattle Promise also does that and removes that financial barrier, but then we also are putting equal focus on helping students to persist and complete whatever their educational goal is. So in order to get into the program, students have to I've separated the things into basically 2 buckets. So the first bucket of requirements is application. They have to submit an application to the Seattle Promise program and to the Seattle College that they're planning to attend. That application deadline is February 15th, so it's only 2 weeks away, right around the corner. And then students also have to complete their financial aid file by March 15th. So that's much earlier than what many of our students do. Completing their financial aid file includes filing their FAFSA or WASPA and then also submitting any additional documents that the financial aid office may need from those students. After that, students are required to do a series of enrollment-related milestones. So students have to attend a Readiness Academy, and this year that will happen on May 15th at all 3 colleges. And that's where students will come to campus and sort of tie up loose ends, take care of business, and most importantly, register for classes. So one of the things that's really exciting for these students is before they even graduate from high school, they have their fall quarter schedule. They know what they're going to be doing at North before they've even finished at Ingram. And then over the summer, they'll come back in September for a summer bridge program. That's a 2-day intensive onboarding program where we're linking students with student support resources on campus. We're making sure that they know where their classes are, that they feel comfortable on campus. Last summer, I know that several faculty also came and taught students what is it going to be like to be in a college environment, and what are the differences with expectations. Jamie, I know that your presentation was a big hit with the students last year, so expect an invite soon. Students are also required to enroll full-time, so they have to be in at least 12 credits in order to maintain eligibility in the program. They have to enroll full-time consecutively every fall, winter, and spring quarter. So we're requiring full-time enrollment. And then they also are required to do a mid-quarter check-in with their advisor, right now their student success specialist, every fall, winter, and spring as well. So we're really being intensive with these students to help them to persist and complete what their goals are. So I have some FAQs, and then we'll jump into what your questions are. One, who oversees Seattle Promise? So Seattle Promise is jointly overseen by the City of Seattle, Seattle Public Schools, and the Seattle colleges. Those organizations are overseen by the Levy Oversight Committee, so that FEP levy that Dr. Buttleman mentioned earlier. How is the program funded? So for 18-19, it is jointly funded by the City of Seattle and the Seattle colleges. The city is using revenue from the sweetened beverage tax to fund partially the program for this year. Beyond the 18-19 academic year, the funding structure will shift to being funded through the Seattle Promise, through the levy that was voted in November. So what does the promise include? So Seattle Promise includes funding for up to 90 credits toward a student's first associate degree. And it also includes that wraparound academic support. So we've got that tuition piece, the funding, and then also the wraparound support services for students. Who are we talking about? So last fall quarter, we had 224 students enrolled district-wide. At North, there were 42 students who were here in fall quarter as a Seattle Promise student. And we're really happy with our retention rate. We're seeing around 85 to 87% retention rate from fall to winter quarter. For context, district-wide, the retention rate hovers at high 50s, low 60% from fall to winter. So we're really happy with this really exciting number. We're projecting to enroll approximately 900 students Seattle Promise students by 2021. So what does it mean that the levy passed? It means several things immediately for us and then some long-term things for us. One of the things that it means is that all of the current 13th year students who were enrolled at North in fall quarter, they're immediately eligible for 2 years of funding. So previously it was set up that they would be eligible for 1 year of that tuition support. They're now eligible for 2 years of that financial support. And that goes the same for the students at Central and at South. Also, that the city will be assisting us with funding the expansion of the Seattle Promise program. And again, we'll be, over the course of this year, expanding from those 6 partner high schools to all 17 partner high schools over the next year. So what is our expansion plan? We have several things that are laid out for our expansion plan. Will you flip us to the next slide? The first thing that is happening this quarter is we are focusing on our relationship building with some of our new partner high schools. So Dr. Brown has been gracious to invite me to come with him to visit with many of the high school principals that are in North's catchment area. First, just to talk about Seattle Promise and answer what questions they have, and then also talk to them about how can we have access to your students to let them know about this really exciting opportunity. And so that will be happening district-wide with all of the presidents and all of the high school principals. By fall 2019, that's when outreach will begin at all 17 high schools. So we will have student success specialists in all 17 high schools letting students know about this really exciting opportunity. In between them, we'll be expanding our team. As you can imagine, to go from 6 high schools to 17 high schools, that is going to require some manpower. So be on the lookout for some positions to post soon. We will be hiring a couple more outreach specialists, so folks who will be in the high schools working with recruiting students for the program. And then we're also going to be hiring some advising or retention specialists as well to work with students who are currently enrolled to help them complete and persist in their educational journey. Beyond that, so for next